The first story for the X-Files was actually a 19-page single-space written outline. And we quickly learned when we got into the series that that wasn't going to work. We needed something that was easier to pitch to ourselves. Jim Wong and Glenn Morgan had used index cards when they were working at Stephen Cannell Productions. We quickly adopted that, and in the 25 years we've been doing the show, we've used that same index card system.
We have these cards on the board, and then you can move the scenes around. You know, each card represented a scene. You write sort of gist of what the scene is. You can see at a glance the path of the story. Like, oh, we have too many Scully and Mulder scenes back to back. Whether there's enough horror or what's the creepy X-Files thing that needs to be in each act.
Okay, one more.
You know, even though it's words on a board, it's really describing pictures, and so what you get is a mosaic. So I think it is as much a picture card as it is a written narrative or a spoken word. Glenn Morgan really set the tone when it comes to the handwriting. He's got immaculate handwriting, and also he's able to distill his thoughts into a very short amount of space. My handwriting is not as neat as his, but it's tidy, as I've been told. You try to distill a dramatic beat down into probably about 12 to 15 words. I tend to use the whole card from top to bottom. Glenn and others less so.
Prove that I'm real!
I worked on a show with Howard Gordon, who was one of our writers back in the day. And Howard now uses dry erase boards. And just seeing him writing on a dry erase board, you go, oh, Howard, what's happened to you? You know, so it's just everybody has just a different method. It doesn't matter, but just the preference of small cards really makes you be concise. You have to boil a scene down to its essence, because if you have too much room, then you start going into details that really aren't that important, that you don't necessarily need.
For the next few hours, this crate is all that matters.
Yes, sir!
Every time we met, somebody would pitch their story. Then you go off and you break it down on index cards and put it on a board. Bring it back to the group, walk everybody through the board. Everybody destroys your board, rips it apart, finds all the flaws, tells you what's great, tells you what's not great, and you go off and you fix your board and improve upon it.
There's a real collaborative opportunity with cards. It really externalizes the process, and cards are disposable. So if you have a card up and you're presenting it to a room full of people,
Mulder is a robot.
Yeah, Mulder. You can just take
you don't
that
like that card? You just take that card right out.
If it doesn't,
Just cross it out, then you rip the card up, and then you throw it on the ground.
This is my first staff writer job, so I'm coming in, you know, very fresh to this whole thing, and I'm pitching my episode to a bunch of guys who have been on the X-Files like since season 1. Like, they have X-Files in their blood, right? So here I am having to step into this very experienced room. It's completely nerve-wracking. And of course, you know, you go in and they have a lot of notes. You know, you kind of tear your board apart and rebuild it. It's kind of like building muscle, you know, you keep tearing it apart, and every time you rebuild it, it gets stronger and stronger.
You know, Chris and I will sit together and stare at a board sometimes for hours, to the point where you start hallucinating. But there's something about seeing it up on the wall, to just not look at your phone, not look at your computer screen.
An outline makes you have to kind of write something over and over again. I guess that to me is the best part of the cards. It's a way of keeping notes of what a scene is about without killing the scene for you before you've written it. You don't have to start writing until you actually start writing.
The X-Files, because it's been going for so long, we've been through a variety of political climates. Now we're in what Darren Morgan is calling a post-conspiracy moment. The truth is now under attack, and I think every episode speaks to this moment in its own way.
It's my new platform, phony fake news.
We did talk a lot about immortality and how technology could help you live forever. That was a big theme of the season. A lot of the episodes are about visions or seeing things that aren't real.
Chris says at the beginning, I want to lie. What is truth? What is real?
Okay, I just get up. Am I dead?
You live in a simulation, and am I alive? Am I dead? You're real, I'm dead. He doesn't know what's what. Darren's episode, Reggie doesn't know what's what. William, the whole time, he's like, who am I and where I come from? And Skinner, who he thought he was in Vietnam and what they told him it was. I thought that was trying to be reflective of how we're being lied to, and if that might all be part of a trick of the mind. But that's where I think we were all coming from, consciously.
I pitched that the season should once again be bookended by mythology episodes. You know, I started a story 25 years ago and I wanted to finish that story. In the season finale of season 10, we basically saw what looked like the end of the world with Scully staring up at a spaceship, and people wondered how we were going to come back. The question was how to get her off the bridge, and I think we have a really dramatic solution.
The mythology episodes are really Chris episodes. We don't break those stories in the writer's room. But he did tell me as he was writing episode 6 last season that he was toying with the idea of doing an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge kind of story, and if you don't know what that is, Google it. He left what we felt was a very clear indication of what he was planning by making the camera go into Scully's eye before all the craziness started to happen.
Ma'am, can you hear me? Can you hear me, ma'am?
It's hard with cliffhangers because you're always boxing yourself into a corner, right?
Can you hear me?
You have to figure out a way out that's either reality or it was all a dream. It's either that. But the bridge that makes it interesting, at least in our world, is that these hallucinations are also prophecies.
I've seen it.
You've seen what, Scully?
I know how it begins.
Tell me what you saw.
You're dying, Mulder.
Is that a future vision that she's having? Or is she losing grip a little bit because of all the testing? Or is it William projecting his fears onto her mind?
Scully.
It's not clear what happened to her, much less how long she'd been there. And we come up with this idea of creating a very subtle time-lapse lighting effect where we had a light on some dolly track and we moved it across the skylight windows of the X-Files office so you saw the light moving. And then ultimately the sun goes away and it ends up in this more overcast, darker feel. So you get the impression that she's been laying there for 8 hours while the sun tracked its way across the sky. We were calling it poor man's time lapse, you know, where if you were to do it in reality, you'd have poor Gillian Anderson lay there for hours while you let the light pass. You know, we obviously can't do that.
I can do better.
I read something that the former head of the CIA said, that the biggest threats to mankind are global warming, first and foremost, a nuclear holocaust, and third of all is the idea of a bio-threat. We've got a much larger population now, a much more mobile population. You can imagine, here we are in flu season, that this could get a whole lot worse.
Your immune system will go first.
But this is what finally kills you.
And you're a party to this?
As you'll choose to be. It's not without conflict that I, Annabeth, approach playing Monica Reyes, knowing that she may be complicit with CSM. I don't know, it's a challenge. It's my struggle. To many, she's crossed over to the dark side. I disagree. She's still with Cigarette Smoking Man for a reason. We don't know that reason. I feel like she's playing chess, and she is, to me personally, playing both sides of the game. And it is still very much a loyal reason to Scully. Something is at stake here. It's not just one child, it's not just one couple, it's not just one agency. It is the world, it is global, and it is massive.
This show has always had a deep state feel that people are talking about all the time now. You know, that there's an ongoing government within the government that exists no matter who's elected and no matter whether it's a Democrat or Republican that gets in. It's kind of a government that runs itself, and that these are unelected but very powerful people that form a nexus between politics and business. So those have always been our villains. That's what Cigarette Smoking Man is, and that's what Mr. Y is, and that's what Erica Price is.
Please point the gun away.
Heaven's sake, Mr. Mulder. All you had to do was knock.
A year and a half before season 10, I went to the Pentagon.
And action.
I was expecting to go there and find a bunch of warmongering soldiers, and I found something quite different. I found a lot of really smart people, scientists.
Okay, here we go.
And someone's job was to think about the future, where America will be in the next 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 years, and most of the talk was about off-planet.
Oh, it's really the moon?
And very cold.
That's how heroes are made.
And do this one with a thin smile.
That's how heroes are made. Oh, fuck.
And cut.
You okay? That was perfect.
Sorry about all the smoke. This is ripe for a conspiracy of men, taking the few, the elite, the people that can afford it off planet. Of course, if you're rich enough and if the technology is developed enough, you might be able to cheat death.
I'm asking, who's the father?
I am. William is my son. I was not suspecting that I would be William's father until I saw it in the script, obviously. And I'm still not sure what that means in literal terms.
You impregnated her?
With science, Mr. Skinner.
My first reaction was, ugh. Because when he first pitched me the story, there was another science angle about the baby being both Mulder and CSM's kid. And there was something really icky about that to me.
Sit up. I knew that William was not necessarily the biological son of Mulder. I thought he was connected to Mulder in deep emotional, spiritual ways, but the idea that the CSM way back in season 7 actually had something to do with his birth. That was something I had thought about back then and something that I wanted to bring forward.
Somehow I did something that caused her to become pregnant with William.
I think we're finished here.
We leave that for the fans to decide.
David, do you want me to cue you for the turn?
Please. Okay. I had set out to write the first and last episodes, and then I realized there was something I wanted to do that dealt with Mulder and Scully's story.
Speak of the devil.
I can't sleep, Mulder. Can you hold me?
So I took it upon myself to write episode 3 to deal with Mulder and Scully's relationship in a way that pushes the show into where we will end up in the season finale. I went through a variety of ideas how to accomplish that because it needed to be an X-File first and foremost, and the relationship story needed to fit into that episode.
Thanks.
There's so many wonderful things that Chris has seeded into the storytelling of this one. The way that Chucky has got such a crush on, I mean, he looks at Scully and he wants her. And the moment Judy sees Mulder, she wants him.
You look fine to me.
I don't, not for such a handsome man as yourself.
Glenn Morgan had told me that the woman who played the mother in the episode Home from season 4 had always wanted to play a man. And so when I was coming up with the idea for a doppelganger story, I actually thought of Karen Conovo. Not only did I write a character for her to play a man, it had a woman, and then it had a bad version of that man and a bad version of that woman. So Karen plays 4 different parts.
Maybe a bird. So I kind of felt each of them first in my body. Little Judy sort of from here, and nasty Judy from there. So Jillian's there, then am I winging there? Yep, there. Yes. Some of her dialogue is so directly insulting to Scully and seems to relish it.
Afraid I'm gonna dirty your cheap little ensemble? You're nothing but a hose bag.
She spots a thing, which is to get her at her womanhood, and then she goes in for that jugular.
How old are you? Past your childbearing years. You're all dried up. Not even half a woman.
Somebody pointed out to me that women, more often than not, change dramatically from their 20s to their 50s, and that men don't change so much. That somehow David's face, you see Mulder, he still exists there, and his mannerisms and his essence.
Aren't you even curious?
And I think that the younger Scully is much further away from who I am today and how I look and the shape of my face and everything. So if it's not going to be physicality necessarily, personality-wise, what are the elements of Scully that are quintessentially Scully that can remain but yet are not inappropriate to somebody who is older?
Where are you going?
It's funny, you know, we've shot all over Vancouver, and 25 years ago we shot in a motel that we ended up shooting at again. I think that was just a wonderful coincidence, but that we have Mulder and Scully and +1 25 years later talking about aging, that is not a coincidence.
So we start.
I have always thought of Mulder and Scully as kind of equal parts of myself. And so I'm writing about things that interest me. With age come certain things, not just wisdom, but physical changes, life changes. How does Mulder think of himself as a middle-aged person? Could Scully have no more children?
It's not gonna happen.
It's nonsense.
No, it's not. I'm at the end of that journey.
No.
I was trying to make that scene be more about menopause, where Scully is mourning for something that she didn't feel like she properly got to attain. And I guess just touching on time past, what's left for us individually and together.
I had actually written several different endings for the episode. They were all kind of cheeky, and they were sort of, ironic turnarounds on the idea that Mulder had been kind of slyly checking out Scully as if he had ulterior motives for staying in that motel with her.
There were tricky points in that show, which was like Mulder checking out Scully's ass and things like that. And I was like, well, how does this resolve?
Go in, you have this moment.
So I checked out her ass, and then we made love, and then who's left wanting more? I didn't want it to be just about sex. Mulder and Scully is not about sex as much as fans may want a sex scene or whatever. It's like their relationship's way beyond that. If you need anything, call me.
I can't imagine that I will.
I pitched to Chris that if Scully checks out my ass by the end of it, the idea was that she's gonna like peek in the door and see me in my underwear. And I was like, it's 5 seconds later, and I was just in a suit. So it's like, what did I do? Like Charlie Chaplin, I jumped out of my clothes, and I'm all of a sudden in my underwear. So it was like trying to figure out, that's not gonna work. You are gonna go that far. And then Jillian and I doing her coverage, a shot that went to the end of the scene. She opens the door, and I'm just standing right there.
That was completely improvised by David. Everyone agreed that that was the perfect ending for the episode.
It's just that, right? And the smile.
It gives Scully a sexual drive, and not just to be objectified, but to be a subject. And when that happened, we all just said, oh, no, that's got to be the ending.
Where
does it bing bong to?
Our study is now complete. We no longer wish to have any further contact with you. I was trying to think of the actual ending of the series, and the idea I came up with was Mulder finds the truth, the aliens are out there, but the aliens are done with us. The end. That was one of the first ideas I had.
Good luck and good riddance.
If Mulder did find the truth, whatever the truth is that he's been seeking all these years, that's out there, and he revealed it, whatever it was. Aliens want to tell us such and such. Half the country now seems to not know what the truth is or seems to care. You don't really even need cover-ups or conspiracies anymore, because so what if people find out? They don't want to believe it anyways, or they're not going to believe it. So all bets are off. So David, you're here.
And she comes over.
She comes over, and this is our final position.
Right, where I'm like this.
That's correct.
So we're gonna do.
So this is final position.
Yeah, and this is what we go up.
That's
from.
correct.
Yeah.
And as we now know, they lived happily ever after.
The character Reggie's interesting because it's the Mandela effect. It's this guy who says, well, wait, I was there. He's like Zelig. I was there at every moment that you guys had these cases. I was there in the beginning of the X-Files, and of course, Mulder doesn't remember.
We used to be partners!
But Darren gets to use kind of archival footage of our shows and put this guy in there.
Wait, if she's their mother, how can she be their... Good boy.
What I wanted from that sequence is, okay, if you're watching the X-Files, you've watched the X-Files your whole life, and all of a sudden you find out, oh, no, the X-Files wasn't a show about Mulder and Scully. It was a show about Mulder and Scully and Reggie something. Everybody knows that. What if your favorite show, you're misremembering and you don't remember a character being in it? Ultimately, who cares? You know, what's the big deal? You're misremembering a TV show. But if a TV show was a big deal in your life, what else are you not remembering correctly, or what has changed? And that is a very tiny, relatable thing, because everybody kind of has a memory that they, oh, I thought it was like this. And if you really want to prove that, it can lead you down deeper and deeper into insanity.
Oh, I experience it all the time when I say, but this is how it was, and people say, no, Jillian, that is not how it was. Then of course I'm right. That must be the Mandela effect, that surely the way I'm remembering it is the right way. I actually think it's kind of a genius episode just because I talk ad nauseum about how much I struggle with remembering. So anytime the various conundrums of memory are addressed with some semblance of humor, it just delights me.
Well, maybe it's one of those other shows, like Outer Limits or...
Confuse the Twilight Zone with the Outer Limits? Do you even know me?
Things get a little weirder in Darren's episodes. One of the premises in it was that our memories are always recreations that are happening now. They're not really things that happened back then.
Yeah, like it would be my left hand that would do it?
Yeah, exactly. Darren wanted to play with that idea of having our self that we are now transposed into the memory. So we have David watching television, but he's his 8-year-old self.
Wait, what? Now I get it. He's a Martian, and he's the devil.
David does a performance, and then we brought in a child and had him do the same performance and marry that with David's performance for the head up.
Twilight Zone was my X-Files.
Wait, what?
The way some people feel about the X-Files, that was the Twilight Zone for me. Saw it as a kid, and it made a huge impression, and I still think it's a great show. Not just the teaser, which was a lot of fun to do, but the ending, in a weird sort of way, and I did it in a much obviously sillier way than the Twilight Zone ever would have, felt like a Twilight Zone type of metaphor, in the sense that that was the thing the Twilight Zone was so great at, is flipping a situation so that you could look at the other side of things.
We are building a wall. It will be a beautiful, albeit invisible wall, that will subatonically incinerate any probes you attempt to send beyond your solar system.
I think I hit the jackpot X-Files episode-wise because I get to work with an actual alien. Not only that, I worked with an alien who surprised everyone by riding up to us on a Segway. And the best part was Darren didn't tell us it was happening. So he just like came down, rolled up to us, and we just had to be like, okay.
The bing bing bong bong is like your goodbye.
Perfect. Darren was doing the voiceover for the alien, and I just couldn't keep a straight face. Like I was almost blowing takes because I was just laughing all the time.
Oh my God.
And Darren brings that out in himself and the crew and the actors.
Can we please just do one more?
It's so good.
I don't know how well it translates.
We'll see you next time.
But being there watching when he was riding the scooter was the funniest thing I've ever seen. And so even if it doesn't work or the episode is crap, I don't care. It was all worth it just to be there seeing that.
So he's walking away.
Start on the X, and I'll go 1, 2, 3, zoom!
Definitely the spaceship was fun. We built a functioning escalator with the sides and the LED lighting, and in pre-visualization, we'd placed this proxy spacecraft. We worked on the very basic design, like a real cheesy alien spaceship from the 1950s. And visual effects will take that to the next level and they'll refine it for a nice finished product.
We were able to recreate almost everything they were asking for in 3D and trying to find that nice balance between feeling like the spaceship's really there, but also making it feel just this much absurd. Feels very Las Vegas in a way. You know, he just blends all these different elements of like something from today with something from the past with something that's supposed to be this science fiction feel at the same time.
Darren himself is a very nostalgic person. His tastes are in the past. While he was up here, we went to see a Buster Keaton movie, you know. I mean, Darren goes back further than I do. And my tastes are in the past, too.
I want to remember how it was. I want to remember how it all was.
There's something just essentially nostalgic about Darren's work always. And always essentially very human. Always like a philosophical treatise.
Most people believe there are two states of consciousness.
The first thing I remember about Ghoulie was I wanted Scully to wake up in a strange place, menaced by a form that she can't really see because she's experiencing sleep paralysis. I actually experienced it myself, I think. I felt like somebody was sitting on top of me, so I couldn't really move. And I've sensed that someone was in the room, even though I couldn't really lift my head to see. And then I remember chasing somebody or being chased, but I always end up back in bed, unable to move.
And one more, reset, please.
It was a real life experience, and lots of it informed how I wanted to shoot the visions.
Jim wanted tilt shift lenses, which you can physically move the lens away from the focal plane. And then you can also twist the lens this way and this way. So the focus falls away differently. I could have my hand here and have my hand here, and both of them would be in focus because the focus is traveling this way instead of this way. You could literally play with it all day, and you'd never get the same shot twice because it's so random and arbitrary.
No pressure, Sally. Just get my camera right on it.
It's right here.
You get things that you couldn't have expected, and that's kind of what we want to do.
There's a shot where you basically see this figure.
I thought it would be interesting if menacing figure turned out to be someone that she really wanted to see.
It's a really clever device that the writers have created for introducing him, because you see him, but you don't see him. You know him, but you don't know him. What's his name?
Jackson. Jackson Vandekamp.
He certainly had an effective introduction.
I feel like I'm gonna fall off a cliff.
I think having a I'm your mom, hello son moment potentially would have been too much. I think the fans want to see that relationship when you first put eyes on him, when you first see his face. But what they won't expect is that when they first see him, he'll be dead. That's probably something that they won't have thought about.
I wanted William's face to be ripped apart, so you don't even have a sense of who he is. Talking with Jillian about it, she felt that the connection that she would have with him as a possible son would be stronger if she can see his face.
It is a question mark as to whether he is actually William, but she's having a reaction as if he might be her son. But having the face be completely blown off felt so not just violent, but the degree of grief that she might feel were that to be 100% the case. She's not leaving her house, you know.
Jillian felt that if she was sure, she wouldn't be participating in any of the investigation. I understood where she was coming from, so I was very happy to make those adjustments.
It was important to me that she can't commit to fully believing that it might be him until the DNA is back.
I need to get the results.
She has to already be thinking that something's up in order to not just completely crumble and crawl up in a ball.
I don't know if you are who I think you might be. But if you are, William, this is what I'd say to you.
It was still impossible not to have a soliloquy with someone you think may possibly be your son who has killed himself without investing in it.
This might not be you.
You know, which was intense.
Oh my God, this is so inadequate. I'm just so sorry.
Jillian was so sweet to me the first day that I was working with her, where I was in a body bag, and she was constantly looking out for me and making sure that I wasn't uncomfortable in this weird situation of playing a dead body and having the thing zipped up over my face. Thank you.
I promise to be just as sweet the next time you work.
Even if I'm not in a dead body bag?
Well, William, I think, is sort of a blank canvas. He had powers, but we didn't know what powers he had. We talked about it with Chris and Glenn and all the writers. Nobody wanted William to be this kind of a milquetoast. Everything's okay, and he's a hero, and all that. In the early stages, I even posited, well, maybe William murdered this other kid. Go. Chris initially was like, yeah, let's do something really dark. And then, you know, we all thought, well, maybe that's a little too dark, you know, to have William be a murderer.
I need to leave. With his misguided attempt at polygamy. Do you know which room Sarah's in?
Sarah?
You can tell he isn't really a good guy. A lot of his artful philosophies end up not meaning all that much when compared to the way that he hurts people.
It's safe. It's over.
Jackson, we just want to talk to you.
He doesn't understand necessarily the way that his actions are affecting other people. And that's something that I think he kind of learns through the arc of the season.
Are you Ghoulie?
One of the challenges that I present myself is trying to find new locations. And one of the things that I'd never had an opportunity to present properly was the abandoned ferry in the Fraser River. It's rich, rich, rich texturally. It's spooky as all get out. I sent the file to the writers before most of the scripts were in place, and Jim latched onto it instantly. I believe the email said dibs on the ferry.
And then Ghoulie comes out.
It's a fortunate thing having something like that there, which the script can be written around, and then we can really make the most of it. You can imagine that building a set like that would be beyond the budget of any but a major feature film. On this occasion, we made the most of it to the extent of actually cutting holes in the decks.
3, 2, 1, action! You all right, dude? Yeah. That was a butt drop.
So last season, during the final episode, I was sitting on set with Chris, and Mitch was kind of playfully busting Chris's chops about how he was underutilized last season. And I thought, I would love to do a Skinner episode.
It was a long time coming to find out who Skinner is, and for me it was very gratifying that we could finally find out a little bit more about this character that I've been playing for a quarter of a century now. Anybody here? Who's been around since the first season.
But we've never really delved into his history. There were a few little tidbits we kind of got a taste of early on, and one of those backstories was about his experience in Vietnam.
3 months into my tour, a 10-year-old North Vietnamese boy walked into camp, covered with grenades. And I blew his head off from a distance of 10 yards.
I was very excited that it was a Skinner episode, and I got in touch with Mitch, and he was very excited that I was doing it.
You got a tooth fairy in them?
There was pressure to tell Skinner's story because maybe it's the only time it's getting told.
Get down, get down!
As Chris has said time and again, he's a man with a very, very strong moral compass. You find out where that moral compass comes from and how it affects his decisions.
John, it's me!
In Vietnam, he developed a relationship with this John James.
It's Skinner!
Haley!
Of course, the character's nickname is Kitten. It's never explained why he's called Kitten. Originally, it was sort of an ironic nickname because he was the opposite of what you would imagine a cute little kitten would be. That's not what the character ultimately became, but in my mind, the backstory was I imagined that his fellow Marines thought that he was kind of a pussy.
Everyone made fun of him a lot, except for Skinner, who befriends him. And in order to sort of diffuse the abuse, he kind of leaned into this nickname they gave him. They called him Kitten, I guess because he was so timid and ultimately somewhat cowardly when he first arrives in country.
They gave him the nickname Kitten, and he got the tattoo of a kitten on his arm, accepting it. And when he did that, everybody was like, okay. It's like, you know, and then they kind of accepted him, and they took care of him. Everybody took care of him. Everybody watched out for him.
Yes, sir!
It's over in a matter of days in television, but the intensity of what we were doing together really gives you a good spirit of camaraderie.
You read the script the first time just as a reader, and then you read the script the second time as a cinematographer. And the second time I read it, I thought, well, this is big. You know, it's always a matter of how to do it within the schedule, and that episode put the crew through a lot.
Our timeline was quite tight. We had to deliver a Vietnam village, helicopters, pits, tiger traps, a motorhome in the middle of a forest, all within the space of about maybe 5-6 days.
This whole Vietnam sequence,
And action!
I don't think I realized at the time the degree of the challenge to do that in November in a deciduous forest that was losing its leaves.
So I inadvertently wrote a pretty big episode. We were shooting in Canada, Vietnam and Canada, obviously not the most similar, but that was not as big a challenge as I feared it would be. The bigger challenge turned out to be, this is the last thing I will ever write that takes place in a pit in the ground, because a pit is just a complete nightmare to shoot in.
Looking at your prey.
Cause I got it.
He's literally like an insect pinned. It's one of those things I think a writer learns is that you write down if somebody falls into a pit, and then you learn what that means in trying to make it happen. Back for that spike, try and get the fuck off of it. So at one point, Gabe asked me, you know, quietly, should I get rid of the pit? And I was like, hell no. No.
She's not gonna move.
Yeah, I won't move. It's too much of a big part of it, and it's awesome. You know, we'll figure it out, and we did. My real concern was that I made an awesome episode for Gabe. It was his first episode, and I really wanted it to be amazing because we're old friends. He comes in, he does this.
Yep.
John.
John!
Everything slows down, and the sound goes out, and you're hallucinating. You're looking at me right here, and it's a fucking monster?
Walter, do you think his disappearance actually has to do with William or that business with the Perot services?
It's hard when you do these Monster of the Week episodes because you don't want the characters to have amnesia about what's happened in the mythology recently. It's kind of a fine line you're always walking, but you want the characters to really be cognizant of what they've just gone through in previous episodes.
You smell like smoke.
You know, a lot of the fans are going to be rubbed the wrong way by seeing Mulder and Scully question Skinner throughout the season.
Give up?
Well, their relationship is pretty much it. The relationship hits a hiccup. When there are these moments of distrust, that's one of the things I think that galls Skinner.
Action, Mitch.
What does he have to do? What does he have? I mean, how many times has he put himself in jeopardy?
The scene I was most nervous about in the script was the mea culpa at the end when Skinner explains to Mulder and Scully, yes, you probably did kind of screw up my career, but I'd make that same decision every time. I had this monologue in my head before I even came up with the story. I knew I wanted to have this really honest, emotional moment.
You two came along and you taught me not to hide from it, but to shine a light directly into the darkest corners.
And I think that was the scene that he really
Skinner.
loved the most and really got to sink his teeth into.
We're with you.
When you see Mr. Chuckle Teeth come out, that's when you're going to point and say it, okay?
Okay.
How's that? How's that for Mr. Chuckle Teeth?
Okay, Sebastian, we're gonna find our perfect position, okay?
Okay.
Hold Mr. Chuckle Teeth up like that.
Yeah, that looks much better.
Yeah, much better.
The kernel that grew the story was the teaser. A mom pushing her kid on a roundabout and that kid disappearing into the woods and something evil that's been living in the woods for a long time taking him.
Sebastian, now, here he is. Look.
Mommy! Mr. Chuckle Teeth!
It's funny because a script changes so much through the process. There's outlining and boarding and pitching, and it'll change a lot there, and then writing it changes, and there's multiple production drafts, and then it changes again in editing. Pretty much the only thing that hasn't changed in this episode since the inception is that teaser.
Andrew?
Definitely wanted to do a really dark, creepy episode with like a classic X-Files monster. When you think of X-Files, there's a lot of classic X-Files monsters, like the host with Fluke Man and Toombs. So I definitely wanted to create a very distinct monster with Mr. Chuckle Teeth. Originally, I was playing around with ideas of witchcraft or some sort of witch living in the woods. There's many stories from around the globe of spirits taking on the guise of what their victims most desire. I've always been really creeped out by kids' TV show characters, and what would a kid want to follow out into the woods? It seemed a kids' TV show character was a really creepy way to do that.
Start feeling the rhythm, start feeling it, bounce it up and down, and move forward. Remember, face the camera. We want to see you facing the camera.
Holly, she had other things to deal with, so she's like, you go figure out what Mr. Chuckle Teeth looks like.
Show me your best dances. Keep dancing, guys. Keep moving.
I know I wanted him to have a huge Cheshire Cat permagrin, just this giant creepy smile.
All right, here we go.
I said we should have a kind of taller, gaunter, Stan Laurel-shaped character. Then Bill Tarasakis came up with that wonderful smiling thing.
When I was a kid, I had a ventriloquist dummy, and it had this kind of eerie look to it, and I thought about it a lot when I was putting together the Photoshop for the character. So this is a fiberglass resin. On the inside of this head, we have the cranial structure of Keith Arbuthnot, who played the Ghoulie and also the alien.
See you in a bit. I recommended we put a Bob's Big Boy hairdo on him. Thus, Mr. Chuckle Teeth was born.
Where's he going?
Working with a kid, especially a kid as young as we got, I think we got a 4-year-old.
Go stand where the pink cross is.
Okay.
I thought that would be really difficult, but it ended up not being as difficult as I thought. He was so excited to be on set. He was amazing.
I wonder if I could go back to my tent now.
Because he's 4 years old, they never had the death conversation with him.
And you want hands by his side? Is that what you want?
We had a big pep talk with the entire crew before that scene.
Fantastic.
You want one last itch?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Where no one was supposed to mention death or being dead.
Okay, put your hands down.
He was a sleeping zombie.
You're doing really well. Sleeping lions. Sleeping zombies.
Because even though we don't show it in the episode, we had a bunch of makeup on him for like wounds and stuff.
Okay, feet really still now, because I'm gonna go look at your feet, okay, Sebastian? You see this, Scully?
It certainly feels like we're back on the X-Files. The actual X-Files and not just the mythology aspect of the X-Files. And so therefore, you know, we're having the same conversations that we used to have. You know, Scully's version of things versus Mulder's version of things. Mulder, the only devil around here, probably parks right here next to the playground stirring something other than his cauldron.
Hey now. It's a procedural, right? You know, he's an FBI agent, so it's basically a cop show. But I like to make him a law enforcement guy who has methods that are different from other law enforcement guys that you've seen before. And it's tough to bring into this show. There's so much plot, it's hard to bring humor into it. It's hard to find the right spots.
I like Mr. Chuckle Teeth.
But really, to me, it's an essential aspect of the show.
Who?
Monsieur Chuckle Teeth.
I really appreciated every moment on set, watching this entire process. Pretty crazy. It was freezing cold. It was raining the entire time. I just wrote as big as I could possibly write, and we did like a car flip. We caught a woman on fire. You know, we had animals, we had kids. I thought the crew was gonna hate me. And it was towards the end of the season, so they were tired and getting burnt out, but they worked so hard.
Moving around is slow and painstaking. Everyone's wearing bulky clothing. You feel like you're walking around like a robot. It is always worth all of that effort because there's nothing like those forest scenes in Vancouver.
Anna! Put the book down, Anna.
Flame!
Let me protect you.
So am I lit before I drop the book, or drop the book then get lit?
Getting lit on fire and doing the stunts was actually a nice mental break for me. This is such a rough show as far as just the hours, and this is happening, that's happening. You just get through that and you're like 10 other things, you never have time to just recover. You just had to go, 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 go. There's no time to think. So that 45 seconds of being on fire, my cell phone didn't work. I couldn't be on a computer and I couldn't talk to anybody. So I was in my own little bubble, my own world. I can't hear anything, I can't see anything. It was nice to be able to sit there and burn, and then when you get hot, lay down.
I chose to name this series of episodes My Struggle because I had read the Karl Ove Knausgaard books.
My name is Fox Mulder.
I marveled at the detail. These are character studies. Each has a story to tell beyond the mythology.
My name is Dana Catherine Scully.
What they believe, how they derive meaning from their lives.
My name is Carl Gerhard Busch.
That was really what I was looking to do with the My Struggle series.
My name is Jackson Vandekamp. When I read for this part, I thought I was playing this guy Jackson, just another guest star. You know, come in, you do your one thing. I had no idea that I was gonna be William. When I came out here, they gave me a monologue to read, and the monologue was just exposing that I had this power, and I had no idea that that's what I was getting myself into.
That was excellent. Nice work. I like the way you made it your own.
This idea that William could be this perfect child, I saw it quite the opposite. I thought of him as, you know, something that owed more to the Omen. I saw him as a little criminal.
I think that it's a real struggle for him to come to terms with the power that he has. It's a curse to be able to see the future and to be able to do the things that he does. He has these seizures that are the source of his power. And if you were gaining power through pain like that, it would be impossible, I think, for you to immediately decide to do good with it, you know?
And bang!
Salvator Mundi means savior of the world. And we play with this idea that William is the golden child of sorts, that he could, in fact, be the basis of a new civilization.
There's more of the script that I haven't read, right? Okay. Will I get a chance to read them, or okay? Sweet.
Finish it.
Okay, I see. That's why.
I withheld the last 4 pages of the script. I wanted to work on those 4 pages until the very end and get them just right.
Cool.
You are the final image that we see.
Wow, man. I don't know what I did to deserve that honor, but thank you.
Action! Jillian!
When it's information that can affect somebody's emotional life and how they play every single scene up until that point, it's important. If you don't know, you don't know to play it, so it's not going to be there. I mean, this is the first time I think that there's been something as big.
We got this.
In episode 10, huge dramatic things happen.
He knows that you love him.
As David Duchovny called it, it's a barn burner.
How can he know that?
Characters die, characters are possibly dead. Mulder learns the horrible truth.
What?
And then Scully tells him the wonderful truth. All this happens in a very short amount of time.
Skinner gets hit by a car and he ends up with his feet sticking out from under the car like in The Wizard of Oz. He shoots Reyes and kills her. I don't think that she was truly a bad person and that she became a casualty by mistake.
3-4 hours before I got the script, I received a heartfelt, sincere email from Chris himself that said, "It's curtains for Monica." That makes me sad, just to say that. It really does.
First shot is a shot at you. The second one is the one that hits you and drives you over.
Got it. I said to Chris, if you're gonna kill me in the face, make it a bullet hole to the third eye, because at least that has some sort of esoteric, enlightened, spiritual symbolism.
Keep those eyes really filled.
Keep guns out of the hands of cigarette-smoking men. Nobody knows whether it's actually the end or not. I mean, it's always going to be a cliffhanger. That's just the nature of the show.
You want like a and back?
Let's try one where you actually hold his gaze for a second.
I take a bullet without blinking?
Yes.
Holy shit.
You're tough.
Badass.
Oh, I like that.
I don't know how you end unless you kill Mulder and Scully.
Action, David.
Action, David.
You just have to kind of hope that whatever cliffhanger was actually the end of the show also satisfies as an actual ending of the show.
It's a finale full of bullets. What can I say? I mean, it's the X-Files. Yes, I die in this episode. The only thing I can say about that is that's the 4th time I've died. So who knows what that means.
It's the last time I speak as Scully.
Oh.
Oh shit, really? Me?
We've stolen a child from Mulder and Scully.
What am I now if I'm not a father?
You are a father.
So I thought the most natural thing in the world was to give them something miraculously once again that they could share as their own. I thought that was a fitting end, not just to this season, but perhaps to the X-Files with Mulder and Scully in it.
Okay, so who's that? She's documenting me documenting. This is me walking to my last shot on the X-Files. Where am I going? Up? I still have to run as Scully.
Here we are, ready to shoot.
92 up, we'll take one. Up. Action!
Is this the moment? That is a serious wrap.
Jillian has said she is not coming back to the show, which I respect and honor.
That was caught on tape.
Is it?
Does the show have more life in it? I think that certainly is a question that needs to be answered by people other than I.
Here we go.
But no matter what happens, it is an ending. And with every ending, it's a new beginning. You know, you go through an exit door, and then it's an entrance to something else.
If this is the end, it's been a long, wonderful journey. You're some of the finest people I know, and the greatest fans we could ever hope for. Here's to you. Get through this out 2018.